Hi everyone, thank you again for joining us for the second episode of Waggin Wednesday, where we are going to be chatting with our training and enrichment team on some frequent behavior and training questions that we get from adopters and fosters. With us today we have Sven. Hi Sven, thank you for joining us.
Hello.
So Sven has been with El Paso Animal Services since last October, and he's been working with animals for about 10 years. So Sven, today we're going to be covering a couple of similar topics. One was a question that was left in our comment section of last week's episode. The first question is, how do I get my puppy to stop crying?
When puppies cry, they're trying to communicate with you. So us being pet owners, we do have to kind of put on our detective hats and figure out, the reasons why they are crying. Some of those reasons could be stress, and then to branch out a little bit beyond that is determine what kind of stress they're having. They could be having anxiety. They could be overly anxious. They could be wanting your attention. Those are just a few things of why the puppy's crying.
But it can also be medical too, right? So there's stress, but there's also medical reasons behind it?
Yes, absolutely. So the very first thing before we start trying to decipher why the puppy's crying is to first make sure that it doesn't have any medical issues. Pain is another reason why the puppy's crying, which would be a medical issue, but if it's consistent crying and everything, and I would definitely consult with your veterinarian and see if there's any medical reasons why it's crying before you try to decide whether it's a behavioral issue.
So you mentioned stress. So what are some of the ways that you can control, if it is stress and your vet already eliminated any medical reasons behind it? Teething, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit later. But those are some of the medical reasons behind crying. But if it is definitely stress related, what are some ways that you can stop or control your puppy from crying?
Okay, so like I said earlier, when the puppy is crying, whining, it's trying to communicate with you. It could be vying for attention. It could be built up stress. Ways that we can to help curb that behavior is to give the puppy things to do. We don't want to reward the crying behavior, so if it's just trying to vie for your attention, we can kind of ignore the puppy at that time and wait to interact with it when it's done crying. We can also distract the puppy or the dog. It could be an adult dog that's crying and vying for your attention. We can distract that dog with toys, with food, play, things like that.
So you mentioned not rewarding the behavior that we don't want, which is the crying, but rewarding the puppy when it's not crying, or the adult dog. What can you reward your pet with if it is not crying?
If it's not crying, we can give it attention, we can give it food, we can give it treats, whether it's like a bully stick or a Kong. A lot of the times the dogs, they simply want your attention. So that's always available to offer for those dogs.
So probably a lot of pets right now are getting a lot of attention because a lot of people are home, but everyone's going to be going back to work eventually. So some of these behaviors are probably going to pick back up again. So it's really important to reward your pet for the behaviors that you want, right?
Yeah, so we oftentimes refer to our pets as our fur babies, whether they're puppies or adults. But what we don't want to do is reinforce that crying behavior. While it's in the act of crying and whining, whimpering, what we don't want to do is coddle the dog at that time. We want to wait till a time where the dog is a little bit more relaxed, a little bit calmer. We do want to give it those skills to be able to manage its emotions on its own and bring down its own anxiety. And that's where the toys come into play and stuff like that, and distracting it from that immediate behavior and then rewarding it when it's exhibiting behavior that we like.
Because a lot of time it can be they're wanting your attention, or they could just be bored too, right? And that's another reason why they're crying.
Yes, and if we're rewarding that behavior, all we're doing is we're creating an atmosphere where they're going to revert to the whining more often and more frequently. So even out of boredom, like you said, the dogs, they can cry and stuff like that, and that's part of us, being detectives and kind of analyzing why the dog is crying.
I think a lot of times some of us pet owners will put human attributes onto our pets, where in reality they're not trying to make us upset or anything. They're not trying to annoy us. They're just trying to communicate with us, and the crying is part of that. They're just trying to communicate what they want and what their needs are, right?
Yes, absolutely. I don't like to correlate people with or dogs with children, but it's how we learn how to communicate with our dogs. We don't communicate in the same way, but we understand the concept of communication, and building that communication is what's overall going to help us with those dogs.
Definitely. And so we talked a little bit about boredom. One thing that puppies especially can get in trouble with when they are bored is chewing on things that they're not supposed to. And that's another challenge with puppies. So what is your advice or recommendations for a puppy that is getting into trouble and chewing on stuff that they're not supposed to? Furniture, cords, whatever.
Yes, that's actually, it's a great subject. It's a subject that we can dive into. It doesn't just relate to puppies. It can be all dogs. Chewing is something natural for dogs. It's not that we are trying to eliminate dogs chewing. We're trying to eliminate the destructive chewing, such as like what you said on shoes, on furniture, on anything that they're not supposed to be chewing on, electrical cords, something that could cause danger to the dog. That's a type of destructive chewing. And what we want to do is show the dogs what's appropriate to chew on versus eliminating the behavior of chewing itself. Some of those things that we can use in puppies, or adults, things like Kongs, bully sticks, nylon bones. We could use even raw bones. We have to make sure that they're raw, they're not cooked, so they don't splinter in the dog's mouth or anything like that. Some viable options are also squeaky toys. It kind of it keeps the dog's attention and makes it want to chew on that.
And so for puppies especially, we mentioned earlier, it could be a medical reason. One of those medical reasons is teething. For puppies,
Mm-hmm.
they definitely need something to chew on, because that's kind of how they relieve some of that pain and pressure on their mouths, is to be chewing on toys. But you want to make sure that you provide them plenty of chew toys, right?
Yes. So puppies, they explore their world with their mouth, and oftentimes when they get to a certain age, they do start teething. We can help alleviate that pain of teething with softer chew toys. We can also, just like with babies, I know I did it with my son, frozen treats. They do have dog toys that you can put in the freezer, and then when you give it to the dog, they're chewing on something cold that kind of numbs their gums and stuff like that. We can't put everything up on the table. If they're chewing on the table itself, we can't put that away. So from the get-go, I would say we want the dog to be engaging in appropriate toys to chew on, and not allowing it to chew, especially with puppies, with like cloth toys or something like that. They don't necessarily distinguish the cloth toy from our shirt or our shoes or anything like that. I've known people to give their dogs their old shoes to chew on, and that's kind of some things that we want to stay away from, because they don't know the difference between your old shoes or your new shoes. So although it's cute at the beginning, especially in the puppy stages, anything that you don't want the adult dog to do, we should not allow the puppy to do.
That's very good advice. And another great piece of advice that I know you and Miriam have talked about too is keeping the puppy from getting into trouble, right? And
yes,
eliminating the space that they can interact with around the house, right?
Yeah, so I did watch the last video there with Miriam. and she did mention the new dogs into your home, whether they're puppies or adult dogs, not to allow them to have free reign of the house. Keep them confined to a smaller area until you get to know those dogs. Puppies, they haven't fully developed their bladders yet, so if you're in the process of house training and stuff like that, you're already containing those dogs in the smaller areas. An ideal place to have the dog chewing on toys and stuff like that could be in their crates as well. It could also help out a little bit. I know it's another subject, but with anxiety and stuff like that, it's another stressor in the dogs. Some dogs, they create such a bond that they want to be with you all the time, and we call those dogs Velcro dogs. And like I said, it's very cute as a puppy. It's very novel as a new dog for them to follow you everywhere in the house. But realistically, we don't want to encourage that behavior if we don't want that all the time. So dogs, they can be independent and they can go in their crates, or they can go into a confined room and relax and chew on those toys without you being there interacting with them.
Definitely. And so what are some, you touched a little bit, but can you talk a little bit more on what are some of the other recommended things for dogs to chew on? You mentioned like ice or cold things. We're coming into summer, so it's really good advice.
Yeah, so one of my favorite all-around tools throughout the whole year is Kongs. They're great. They have a wide opening at one end and a small opening at the other end. It makes it so there's not a suction, it's not pulling the food back in, but we can fill those with wet dog food. We can soak their kibble in there. It can be a portion of their meal every day if you're portioning out the dog's meals as well. There's recipes online. I wouldn't get too extravagant with my recipes, but it's things that you can rotate in and out of the freezer. Another good thing would be, even like you said, ice cubes and stuff like that. They can chew on. You can freeze broth, like chicken bone broth and stuff like that. As long as it's not upsetting the dog's stomach and it's a treat still, it's not a meal. So we do want to limit the amount they're consuming in those. Other toys that we can use is bully sticks or rawhides. Again, bones, raw bones. We can use the squeaker toys, nylon bones. When we are using these toys, we just have to keep in mind the dog's safety. Especially with like Kongs and stuff like that, we want to determine the size of the dog's mouth in proportion to the size of the toy.
And how heavy of a chewer they are, right?
Yes, so puppies, they do have different levels of Kongs. And you can determine that level based on your dog and his chewing habits. But we always want to get a size that they're not going to be able to swallow the toy whole. And with things like the rawhides or the bones, we want to make sure we monitor them with those toys. Toys that are able to be left alone with the puppy for a period of time would be stuff that they can consume, like the bully sticks, or tougher toys like the Kongs and stuff like that. There's a lot less worry about leaving those toys alone with the dogs. Again, the toys that you don't want to leave with the dogs are squeakers, anything that the dog can swallow, bones, and stuff like that.
So it's really important to supervise your pet when they're chewing and stuff.
Yes. So again, when I'm at home, even if my dog has a Kong, I'm monitoring the dog. I might not be sitting there staring at the dog the whole time, but I do keep an eye on them, make sure everything's okay. Over time, the Kongs do break down. They can break apart a little bit, and we want to make sure that we replace those toys as they break down. They're not made to last forever, but they do last for a very long time.
Definitely. And this is all really great advice. Thank you so much, Sven. So I think some of the key points that we really touched on was, chewing is a natural behavior. So give your pet plenty of things to chew on, because this is completely normal, and it's a great way for them to relieve stress, which can, cause them to either act out or get into trouble that you don't necessarily want them to do. But and then also maybe even cry out for your attention or out of boredom. So give your pet plenty of things to do. We have a shameless plug. We have a show every Thursday, Cat Lady Bertha with El Paso Animal Services. She goes over some awesome enrichment tips for both cats and dogs. So definitely tune into our Facebook page for those because we go over how to stuff Kongs, how to make other kinds of treats and stuff like that. So if you're looking for ways to keep your pet busy at home, definitely check out Cat Lady Bertha on our Facebook page because she gives a lot of really great advice for both cats and dogs. But is there anything else that you want to add, Sven?
No, I mean, the only thing I would like to add maybe is, keep trying to build that relationship with your dog. Keep trying to communicate with the dog. It's an ongoing task, and we just have to try our hardest.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Sven, for joining us and for that awesome advice. Sven and Miriam, again, will be tuning in every Wednesday for Waggin Wednesday, where we're going to be chatting with our training enrichment team on different behavior questions or training advice. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to add them in the comments below of this video, and we can definitely cover them in a future episode. Again, thank you so much for watching us, and tune in next week.
Bye.